Well, a very good morning on this post-Christmas, New Year's Sunday for our post-sermon discussion. Today we are discussing my service, which was a prayer of hope for a new year. So we have Sharon who wanted to go first.
Well, I appreciate the prayer of hope very much
Mm.
because, like we were talking about earlier, the last 2 years particularly have been challenging, especially this past 2020.
Yeah.
And I liked what you said about constructive conflict.
Yeah.
And I was trying to write down exactly what you said that time, as well as, where is it? Oh, about the no policy. So do you remember what your actual words were for constructive conflict, blah, 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 blah?
Well, I that came out of really reading a lot about Christian schisms, and in that Christianity, especially with the various councils that they had, was attempting to have a codified single interpretation of the Bible and God, as opposed to the Jews, who really to this day have had no real schisms of note. I mean, you can talk about Orthodox versus Reform versus, ethnic Jew versus cultural Jew, but they've been able to stay a unified faith really since their inception, and with all of their different interpretations of the Tanakh or the Torah, it hasn't really affected their sense of unity. So so that was the impetus for that section.
Okay, and then the other, no policy should determine what is
moral.
Oh, okay. Oh, right. Okay. Yes, there is a stream of thought in our society currently that policies are capable of solving what is a cultural or a moral shortcoming, right? So for instance, and this is something that I'm sure we all would be against, I imagine, that single parent households are a concern, right? So we could make a policy of just no divorce and forced cohabitation, right? That would be a terrible idea, to solve a problem, right? Um,
God.
but there are suggestions of policies for, say, take for instance something that we could debate, say hiring quotas, right? Or school admissions quotas. Like, these are things that are policy remedies for a perceived cultural shortcoming. And I am very skeptical as to how much good those could do.
okay.
Yeah.
So thank you. I met somebody that said that she realized to get any change in culture,
Yeah.
you need to address policy.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And because of that, she contemplated going to law school.
Yeah.
So I piggybacked on that. I thought, oh, that's where I made my mistake. I used to think I should have studied economics.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
understand any of the financial issues that have surfaced.
I'll introduce you to my brother.
And then I thought, well, maybe I should have gone into law so that I could have done something to change. Because what I have done is just, snail pace.
Yeah. Yeah.
See
Well,
any kind of change.
however you think about the guy, whether you're a fan or not, Andrew Breitbart, his most famous quote, which I think is absolutely undeniable, is politics is downstream from culture. Right. So often our political standpoint will be a reaction to whatever's happening in, say, film and
I
television.
did
Yeah, music, you know, all of these cultural elements of our society. So, but those are great. Thank you for those questions. Those are great questions. Donna
it.
wanted to, yeah.
Yes. Well, first I want to say this is one of your best sermons.
Oh, well,
Um,
thank you.
and, you know, I used to not understand you, and I'm getting better at understanding you. But I was thinking about that after I listened to your sermon. I thought, oh, I know why I understand him, because he's saying things that I believe in. And so that got me to thinking about what if I didn't believe in him, and then
Sure.
it fell right into your sermon, you know. The
Yeah.
one thing I wanted to just, well, I have a lot of things, but this time I just want to talk about peace being the absence of conflict.
Mhm.
And I kind of agree with you there, because I think if there was no, and we can use the word conflict, disagreement, whatever you want to use, but how do we grow
Mhm.
if there's
Yeah.
no urge to consider new things and whatever? I don't think we
Yeah.
could actually grow, and that's what we are, as an evolving species. So
Mhm.
I agree with you wholeheartedly that we need that in order to grow and develop and create new things. Otherwise, if there was no conflict, or if we accepted everything, we'd be stagnant. So I
Absolutely.
wanted to comment on that, and that that poem that you read was absolutely gorgeous. I would
Oh, yeah.
just beautiful. And could you send that to us?
Yeah.
Do you have
Yeah.
it? Okay.
It's The Peace of Wild Things by Wendell Berry. And yeah, it is. It's a really profound, you know, it's one of those things about poetry that to me I use as proof of the divine, right?
Yes.
Because how is it that encapsulated in 7 or 10 lines of language can we find this bottomless, you know, wisdom or reflection, right? It really defies logic to some degree, and reality, and you know, that's where we really, that's what's beautiful about art in general, is that it's so capable of taking us into the realm of transcendence. You know, as far as you being able to understand me better, I have to say that y- y- um moving into speaking to a church where my only experiences were speaking in front of a classroom, it's something that I've consciously been working at to to be a better communicator in church, you know. And so I'm glad that it seems like I'm getting a little better at it. So
No,
so I'm
you're
glad
getting
that that
very
makes
good
sense.
at it. I just,
Yeah.
early back on, it was real too
I
technical for me,
Yeah.
and a lot of the things I didn't understand, because you were coming from a place I'd never been. But yeah, these last, well, several times, it's nice for me to be able to understand you,
Well,
and put it into my realm of what I do understand. So I just wanted to. There was absolutely nothing wrong with your prior
no,
sermons. I just didn't
I didn't
understand
take it that way. No, no, no.
them.
You've paid me a great compliment, and I appreciate that. You know, you and I, because you take the first Sundays typically, and I take the last Sundays, we've kind of become bookends of each other for the month. But I mean that in the best way, that
Yeah.
you know, I I very much play off of what you have to say in your talks. um so yeah. But the one thing that you talked about with conflict forcing us to grow, you know, that's a subject that you and I come back to all the time, of like, how do we deal with the chaos of life and then trying to make order out of that chaos. You know, and I'm sure that we're going to keep, as we go forward, it's going to be a subject that will always be there. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I agree, because we need the chaos in order for us to wake up.
I agree. Yeah.
Unfortunately, sometimes it's a little painful. However,
Yeah.
when you look at what happens as we go through it, and when we get through some of it, it's amazing. There are amazing gifts to that.
Yeah.
That we're just learning.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very
Yeah.
cool. JC, you wanted to go next.
Yes.
Oh,
I don't know what I probably thought I was going to say when I signed up, but this discussion is really rich.
oh, good.
And the thing that you said back in trying to describe yourself as your words as a prayer,
Mhm.
I say yes. We must believe
Mhm.
that whatever the conflict is in any given moment, that how we solve it determines the future good.
Yeah.
And if we just shut people down, murder them, put them in prisons, whatever we do, we're not going anywhere.
That's right.
But if I can remember at the time, I feel conflict here. Am I coming from my value system? Am I actually coming from love?
Mhm.
And is this other person coming from their value system? Okay, then what's that system? Because we're going to communicate with each other based on what we each believe. And if the beliefs are too diverse, you got to know you're not going much of anywhere. On the other hand, if it's really diverse, I need to back down to what's my one important point I want them to understand about me.
Mhm.
And that had better be that I really, really want to get along. And I really, really want to see what the distance between us is
Mhm.
and how that might be making me act.
Mhm.
And I am responsible for that. And so that part of remembering that we have to believe it's going to good is a part of a thing that I did last Sunday in the left-hand, right-hand thing. If this is the conflict now, how is it going to feel when it's resolved? Not one, but when two people, okay, get where each other is, are, was, whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it's going to take to make that happen. All I can do is hold on to what I know it will feel like when we are both able to be together.
Mhm.
So that wasn't silliness, and it wasn't too simple to be important.
Mhm.
I've done this in my life. This is what's now, and this is how this feels, how bad this feels.
Mhm.
This is what I want to feel. So something has to change here, and I'm right in the middle of it.
Yeah.
But I need to be patient.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, Lillian, I see you want to go next. Just to respond briefly, I think the most important thing out of what you just said is really that even if you can't come to an agreement, that understanding each other is in and of itself an improvement.
Right.
So yeah. But yes, I wholeheartedly agree with the goals, that you outlined. Yeah. Lillian, yeah, something to add, I think.
Yeah, I just want to take that a step further, and for me, what's really simple language, and that's the whole idea of win-win.
Mhm.
And win-win cannot mean change.
Yeah.
Change of the other person, change of opinion, change. I think win-win has to start with the most basics of being heard. If I can't hear the other person and I feel they can't hear me, then I don't even have the first step of feeling like at the end of this conversation, it's going to be a resolution, a win-win, anything. And so that makes me think of what was said to you earlier about your change in delivery.
Mhm. Yeah,
When you, and I want to give you some feedback. May I give you some feedback?
please.
Because
That's why we're here.
to me, the change is huge.
Oh.
When you first started, someone made the comment, it was kind of like a college class.
Yep.
It was brilliant. It was that
Oh.
kind of stimulant, make you think, I'm going to say these challenging things and I'm going to say them in a way that maybe I don't even believe, just to get you to say something and think about it, yourself. And when I first heard that in church, I went, ah. And I could feel myself going back to being in a classroom myself and having done that to students, and then having been a student in a class in philosophy and ethics and all those kinds of classes, and being the recipient of that, you are almost, not quite, almost the polar opposite now. And so the delivery is stimulating. The delivery makes us want to respond to you, maybe even ask you back some challenging kinds of questions. But I myself don't feel challenged or pinned or.
Oh, sure. Okay. Okay.
So congratulations, because that's
Thank you.
not an easy move to make when you have been teaching at the college level for quite a while, because it's so different than teaching at other levels. And so I commend you for whatever work it took to identify it and really work on making that.
A lot of
Me
listening.
too.
A lot of listening. Were you first off, thank you very much. Was there anything else?
Just no, just I
Okay,
want to put the
yeah.
piece about the win-win.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And okay, so Martha will go next. But yeah, when I first heard the idea of a win-win, it was in context of business dealings. And the interesting thing about that to me is that if I buy something from you that I want, right, and you receive the money, we both won, but we both had to give up something at the same time. And I wonder if there's an analogy there for other kinds of like understanding conflicts or civil conflicts to make a win-win.
I never heard it in the context of business. So.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Oh, really?
I think it was in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People book. Yeah. But yeah, okay.
Right.
Martha.
But I didn't get it that way. Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay. Well, just to piggyback on what's been said, I felt it was more conversational, more gentle, more your delivery. It was like you were having a conversation with us, and that's what I appreciate. Like all the conversations over time that we have had over the dinner table, it was more like that. And the fact that I should have brought up that biblical quote, but here's what I'm remembering. It's just all normal humanness.
Yes.
And what I wanted to address was the idea of war. All change comes from war. Well,
Right.
that relates to basically what Donna has taught us over time with the chaos theory. I mean, it's the same, to me, it's the same concept. Maybe I'm not equating it exactly right, but I think that it forces people to look at what their behaviors are, and are those behaviors productive for everyone, not just yourself. And I think like the story of the shepherd going after, was it best that he go after that lost sheep with all of the sheep? Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. We need to do things that are for the good of all. And there's too many people that are working on just what's good for me in this little box. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah. So the quote is all evolution looks like war at first. And it's the opening line from Fritz Leiber's The Big Time of the final chapter of that book. And it's always stuck with me. It stuck with me so much. I used it as a line, an opening line in a song, which I almost included in this service,
Mm.
but it's a little more
What-
abstract.
What was his first name, please? Was it Fritz?
Fritz, yeah,
Okay.
Fritz Leiber, yeah, the big time.
Right. Yeah.
Liber?
I think it's Lieber.
Lieb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was a very
The big
popular,
time.
yeah, he was a popular science fiction writer in like the 1950s
Right.
and 60s.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the thing, is that if you look at, you know, the evolutionary chain of animals, you know, it's kind of like the anti-transcendentalist argument, where, you know, it's kind of the opposite of the peace of wild things, where we look at the natural world, and an anti-transcendentalist would say, this is a violent place. This is a place of intense competition, and, you know, and really discount the beauty of the natural world. Which is funny, because that is in and of itself a form of conflict, you know, of like the transcendentalists between the anti-transcendentalists, you know. So yeah. Oh, and speaking of, did everybody get the transcription of the lyrics from Reps Verses? I
It didn't.
included it.
It came through the email, didn't it?
It was in the email.
Yeah. Mhm.
Cool.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
That was a little bit of a Herculean task of writing all of that down. I'm sorry, JC, I'm going off on a tangent. JC.
Okay, this is my usual report from the wisdom of the comics.
Okay.
And losing our Saturday, we now have a marvelous two-sided insert of the comics that are missing, because
Yes.
of course the news can go wherever it wants to go, but the comics stay put. Now there's one here called Phoebe and Her Unicorn, which I never have read. I don't know why I read it this time. Anyway, the unicorn says to the little wide-eyed girl, "Happy New Fears." And she said, "You mean New Year's?" "Oh, I must certainly do not." "Well, then I'm afraid I'm confused." "Afraid, good, yes. Embrace this new fear." "I have no idea what's going on. Let the fear flow through you and not get stuck in you."
Well,
Now,
yeah.
I mean, a unicorn and a little girl, and that's about what we need right now when any of this evolution looking like war or feeling like war. Go back to this unicorn that says, just go with it and know what's there. And what's new is going to be really different, and it's going to look like, well, Donna, like in Upside Down Thinking,
Yeah.
right? In that
Yeah.
book, the man is saying absolutely everything you believe about science is right, but it's wrong because it doesn't know about this other thing. And you and I need to do this in this church somewhere. We need, because reading that has made me see, oh, yes, everything that was almost obvious, we understand. What we don't understand now is the rest of it.
The rest
And
of
we
the
better
story.
understand the rest of it, because it's making it happen. Anyway,
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it, JC.
yes, all right, sometime.
Yes.
Martha wanted to. Oh wait, is that the?
Oh,
company?
yes, Martha did.
That's what I was gonna
AEO.
say. Oh, Louise.
If I could.
Yeah,
I just
go ahead.
wanted to piggyback on again that poem.
Mhm.
When I first read that, I thought, that's the simple, meaningful, be in the present moment, no structure, no you coulda, woulda, shoulda.
Mhm.
And I think that's one of our problems as a society today. We coulda, woulda, shouldas, emails coming out of our ears, social media, and people are like this. And I find I have to go outside, and I know Connie would agree with this, and those of us who are plant people,
Yeah.
just go look and talk to the plants or to watch the bugs crawl around. I mean, it's really important to be outside in nature, whatever area it is, or to put that in your mind's eye. So what I was doing is reformatting all those readings, and I can send those to everybody if you would like that.
Yeah, Sharon was nice enough to write, and I didn't know this, so thank you, Sharon. Meditation 483 in the UU hymnal is Wendell Berry's poem.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
Okay.
that's what we call synchronicity, you know. That
What was it? What was it? Which one?
483. Yeah,
483?
in the UU hymnal, the
Chat.
piece of wild things. Yeah. But going back to what JC was talking about, you know, with the comic and the cartoon, you know, isn't it interesting that humor has a way of delivering wisdom that only humor can do, right?
Yes.
And I think of King Lear, and if you haven't watched King Lear in a while, it is definitely time to go back and watch King Lear, because there's the court jester is the only one who is able to tell the truth to the king.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh,
He
yes,
said-
Always.
of course.
Yeah.
The clown.
Yeah. He says, yeah, exactly.
Well, there you go, Sharon.
He says, would that you were wise before you were old, you know, and the amount of troubles that he wouldn't have had to face. So yes, humor matters. Kim, did I see your hand go up? I couldn't.
Well, it can.
Good.
Okay.
That reminded me, oh, I'm sorry, I thought you weren't going to speak. Sorry, Kim.
It's okay. The last couple of churches at my church, and now this one, now this sermon, has really made me think that because I've been really down personally, and with grief, and amongst other stuff, and you know, it just says that we should be joyous with the small things, and you know, there's big stuff that we have no control over. It is what it is. So we have to bring pleasure and find fun things in the small stuff. And so that's what I've been trying to do. Oh, by the way, your little log verse is Matthew 7:3.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. But yeah, and maybe that is one of the single biggest pieces of wisdom that anybody who really knows grief has to find, is that, you know, that there, I think, and tell me if I'm getting this wrong, but that we ought to have a sense of gratitude when things that we can be happy about come along, right? No matter how small it is. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I had a Bible verse that I found that kind of explains what I'm feeling. It says to ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be open to you. So if you're constantly thinking, oh, I'm sad, nothing's going to happen. So you have to kind of ask for help and ask for, you know, ask by going out with somebody or doing something small, and you'll start getting a little better here and there.
Yeah, have a sense of courage, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And by the way, the seek and ye shall find, ask and it shall be given is in Rep's lyrics for, I don't know if you skipped over it or meaning you, the group, skipped over the song or listened to it, but he
I listen.
Yeah.
Understand them.
And I know you're not.
I had trouble hearing it. That was my problem.
Yeah, which is why I sent the lyrics. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I didn't read them, and that's the problem.
That's okay. That's all right. I'm not scolding anybody. I'm just yeah. Donna, I think I saw your hand go up a few times.
Oh, when we were talking, there's this song that I always sing when I think to do it, to remind myself, if I knew then what I know now,
Mhm.
I didn't know then what I know now, so get over it. That's what I say to me. I did my best. And I love that song because it brings me back to where I am now, and it's okay where I am now.
And
Because we didn't know these things back then, and we couldn't have done any different anyway, because I truly believe we do the best we can in the moment. So
yeah,
anyway, I love that song because it reminds me.
Hi,
Yeah.
Connie. It's good to see you there.
yes,
I can't stay connected.
yeah, yeah. It's unfortunate because we do see you popping in and out.
Yeah, I'm having problems with the auditory part too.
Okay.
So I'll watch it on YouTube later today.
Yes. Well, for what it's worth, it's good to have your face there. So. Yep.
Hi.
um Donna, the idea of if I knew then what I know now is, again, it's like one of those crucial lessons, because it's so easy for us to judge ourselves based on where we are now and how maybe we should have known better. And I think that that lesson extends to other people as well, because it's easy for us to imagine other people knowing what we know and experiencing what we've experienced.
Yes.
Whereas, if you can separate yourself from that mentality, it's so much easier to have patience with people. So,
And I think that involves letting go of the judgments,
yes. Yeah.
big
100%.
time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In Unity, we have this phrase, don't should all over yourself.
I've heard that. Yeah.
Yes, don't should all over yourself. I mean, it just, that I think contributes to depression.
Yes.
Why didn't I do that? Well, you didn't, period, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it takes practice to get there. Trust me.
Yeah. I'll let you know when I get there. So.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
That's why I keep reminding myself of that song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Laleen, and then Glennis and Lurley, if you wanted to say something, or not, you don't have to. But go ahead, Laleen.
I'm thinking about just a really brief comment, Michael, that you made about morality and policy and consciousness and change, that whole arena. And I find in my own lifespan, which the older I get, the more I get to see how broad and how many changes have gone on, in my soon to approach 80 years. And when I look back over that incredible range of change, I realize that there are indeed patterns, and those patterns do involve points at which policy or legislation, even if it's ever come lately, has to step in order to create a cultural change. And those cultural change challenges usually are things that, if we adhere to the UU7 principles, for us anyway, are things that have been often thought about, talked about, and we would approach very differently, as I think Unity would, and a few of the other faiths. But without that, and with so much of the deeply rooted, deeply seated prejudices that exist, or just beliefs, I won't even call them prejudices, sometimes I don't see another route that could create change. And I say that with incredible sincerity. And I've often said to JC, there was a time in my life when there was a policy decision to be made, and I was adamant on the wrong side. And that was a decision made, like 20 years ago. about the direction that all of the leadership within the gay rights movement would go next. God, I think it's been 35 years now. The decision was the right to marry.
Yeah. Mhm.
And my position was it was too soon.
Oh.
It won't ever happen. You know, and there were people from, you know, National Gay Rights Task Force, Human Rights Coalition, I mean, from all over the country. And I'm like this one minority, but I really strongly felt at that point in time, it was too big a jump. And I'm so happy to have been wrong,
Mhm.
you know, and yet at the same time, I got to witness a relentless pathway,
Mhm.
step after step after step, and no willingness to give up, and how that did indeed create, you know, eventually major social change.
Mhm.
And it wasn't that people willingly gave up some of their, be they religious beliefs, be they cultural beliefs, but it was instead they embraced the right to, the equal right to, or just the same rights, you know, for. And so that just taught me such a really valuable lesson that I don't think I'll ever do that again in my next 20 years, in my next lifetime, you know, be that adamant or that sort of unwilling to just totally let go of a position and just totally let it in. So
Yeah.
that's a lead into another maybe ask sometime.
Yeah.
If either in sort of an AEO kind of discussion, any kind of discussion, or maybe in a sermon,
Mhm.
one of you might want to approach that head on. You
Yeah.
know, how do we make major change, be it cultural, religious, philosophical? I mean, we could cover all areas of it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And you know, in order to you know, one thing that I see now, that in order to really flesh out this subject, we would need a solid 3-hour conversation, you know, at least. So to your point, like, gay marriage was something that was essentially decided in the court, you know, that it was a very undemocratic system, because if you were to look at like what was deemed protecting marriage, um uh policies, I guess, you know, in California, in Arizona, in places like that, where they were actively on the books limiting marriage to between a man and a woman.
well,
It-
so was desegregating schools.
right,
You
right.
know, so we can point to so many where it took.
Sure. And
You know,
yeah, and in order to not make this a 3-hour conversation, I thought I'd stick with gay
right.
marriage. Because you're right, because yeah, in order to desegregate the schools, in one case the National Guard had to be called in, you know. And so these are instances where in retrospect it looks like the necessary authorities took the right step in order to create, as our Constitution would have us believe, a more perfect union. You know, meaning more just, more equitable. Um, and so, you know, same thing with, you know, it was a policy of the North that we were not going to have slaves in the North, you know. And I would say that, you know, slavery was one of the most severe moral shortcomings in human history, right? And so it's not to say that we can't in history find policies or edicts, you know, from those in power that have been correct in history's eyes. You know, I have no problem agreeing that, you know, gay marriage being decreed legal by the courts was a good decision. I supported it at the time, and I still support it now. I guess what I'm saying is that I don't want to run the risk of seeing government or those in power as the final, the only solution or the first solution even. Right.
I don't think they are, though. I think social uprising is just
Right.
as with the current movement, with Black Lives Matter.
And
I mean,
I'm for social movement, right? But at the same time, and Black Lives Matter is a good, and so is Antifa. They're good examples where they wield an enormous amount of power because those in power have aligned themselves to the cause. So if I say that I'm against Black Lives Matter, which I am as an organization, the inference from that would be that I believe that Black lives don't matter. And that's not what I'm saying at all. I absolutely believe that Black lives matter, but I am wholly against socialism. I'm wholly against Marxism, and I am for the nuclear family as a cornerstone of Western civilization, right? And so that's an example of how something can start as perhaps a noble social issue, but then grow in power just beyond its own purview. Oh, we got deep real fast.
no, I'm just going to come back to the same thing I said. I think it would make for an incredible discussion.
Yeah.
And it's broad. It's not
Mhm.
just using courts, it's using all different kinds of means. But my interest there is when we center that around, some UU principle guiding lights. I think a sermon could be amazing, and I think it could lead to AEO discussions that could be incredibly enlightening.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I think we got several people here who are sermon makers.
No, and it's true, and it's true. And one thing that I would want to be very clear about in all of this is I believe that there is more than a kernel of justification in all of these social movements that have sprung up, right? And so and because of that, yeah, I think it would absolutely be worth discussing. If for no other reason than to really explore the topic in a way that maybe we haven't been able to, because society's become so fractured, that unfortunately we're not really talking to each other anymore, which is unfortunate, which is something that JC brought up, I think, in last week's discussion.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
When there was that pause, I was trying to write down what I was thinking, because sometimes thoughts just don't have enough to hold their own.
Mhm.
And what I did finally write down was that any policy has a lot of different attachments, and some are there and some aren't. So if one's discussing something that could be future,
Mhm.
we need to be clear that, does it have anything to, is climate change a part of it? Is
Mhm.
Black Lives Matter a part of it? What other aspects are affected by this?
Yeah.
Because it's perfectly clear right now that all our issues can use some direction at the moment.
Yes.
And the way we would have done it 4 years ago is not necessarily even an option anymore.
Right.
So,
There's
Yeah.
some great letters to the editor.
oh yeah, today.
Oh.
Marianne Williamson. I mean, Marianne.
No, Marianne.
Marianne
Oh,
Wilcox.
Marianne,
That's
sorry.
okay. That's okay. Yeah, I'm glad.
They're all around, that kind of theme,
Yeah.
especially, going after Dallas Hurt and, what he did in the legislature, and the weight and power that something like that can take for misuse.
Mhm.
Read the paper today, it's great.
It's really,
Yeah.
really funny. And we really need some big words that will give concepts like silly
Right.
more power, or
Okay.
drama queen. I mean, those are all wonderful words, but they don't have power. They're a joke, which is the point of using them, is that it's a joke.
Well, of course, if we're talking about that instance, I wouldn't want to diminish that. What we may find it a silly display, but that display has resonated with with many people on the other side of the discussion, and
Which is why those letters are
Yeah.
really important,
yeah.
because they talk about what we do for the individual and what we do for the greater good
and
and the morality of those kinds of
Mhm.
decisions.
and that is
So I would take that on to.
yeah. Oh yeah.
anything.
Well, but yeah, what you're talking about, in a lot of ways, is that first and seventh principle, is that, as Stephen Landale was quick to point out, that all of our ethical orientation emerges out of the rights and responsibilities of the individual, and what obligation that individual has to the group, which was something that I also tried to get across in this talk. And so yeah, for sure, there, and these are big topics, and the problem with these big topics is that there is no social or political topic that is isolated, right? Is that climate change is going to play into the pandemic, which is going to play into our social ills, and our, how segregated and separated we are. All of these things are interconnected, and it's going to take somebody a lot smarter than me, to be able to suss it out. So yes, Sharon.
Well, I was just going to ask you, because I felt like you're smarter than I am.
That's generous.
You said that the Good Shepherd saves sheep,
Mhm.
and there are plenty of lost sheep out there that
Mhm.
one is going after.
Yeah.
And I recognize a lot of people are going after, but the number of lost sheep is just so paramount
You're right. Yeah.
that it's not as observable
Yeah.
as it needs to be.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you have ideas
Well,
on addressing that besides this AEO.
yeah. And when I say, that no one is going after it, they're bracketed, there should have been seemingly no one is going after, because having worked in an alternative high school, the problems just seem so insurmountable, of what these young people are dealing with, and how, they, at the very least, which is probably everything, they've been cast aside by their parents, either through like drug use or other, bad, ill behaviors, on the part of the parents, but also the way that our community could just look at these kids, especially the boys, but also the girls as well, and just see them as a nuisance, like our world would be better if these lost sheep, would just go away, kind of mentality.
We're here, we have Phoenix School, which is
Mhm.
still functioning
Yes.
after almost 40 years, and nobody thought that would happen.
Yeah.
And so this is a situation where, and there, what we found out was how the system had to give
Mhm.
like, you don't give grades until they're getting B's or A's.
Okay.
So when a kid finally got a paper back with a B on it or an A minus, they couldn't believe it
Mhm.
because they had seen no F's, D's, or C's.
Yeah. And
That's
so,
a simple thing, but boy, you can't do that in regular school.
right. So say the kid writes a paper and it's not B or A gradable. Is the teacher then to return the paper with suggestions, rework it, and then?
There is that, or there's just usually sit down and talk to me about this.
Okay.
And then to point out, oh, so that's a thought.
Yeah.
That could be a paragraph opener, that sentence, and then see where that goes. So yes,
Yeah.
everything is teachable
Mhm.
until you begin to get it right.
And
then you get praise.
and that is ideally, I think that's the ideal educational environment, you know.
Right.
But it takes an enormous investment of time.
Oh,
You know,
yes, it
and
does.
and it's worth that
Yeah.
investment is worth it.
Mhm.
But you know, that's something that we have to recognize, and thank God the Phoenix School is there, you know, especially since Woolley closed. You know, so
Right.
I saw Donna's hand go up.
Yes, I just, one of the fundamental premises for a lot of our chaos is the fact that when we look at these children that are causing quote unquote problems
Mhm.
for the group, what we call normal group, when we look at our prisoners and everything, we're looking at them as separate from us.
Mm.
And that gives them permission to cast them aside.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the fundamental problems is seeing them as separate. If we started seeing them as part of us, which they are,
Yes.
then we would handle this in a much different way. You know, like JC we would be looking at them, working with them instead of casting them aside as, let's just get rid of them because they're not part of the norm. And personally, the norm needs to be changed, in my opinion, because it's based on some very inequitable and
Yeah, no,
premises.
you're not kidding. So I have and we're winding down here. But here's a feel-good story for you. I have a hero, and I don't know this man's name. I've only seen him once, but it was a friend of mine wanted to go and adopt a cat on her birthday, so we went to Saving Grace. And this man from the sheriff's office, he had on a sheriff's uniform, was directing a group of prisoners, you know, in their black and white striped jumpsuits, of how to spread the gravel over the Saving Grace parking lot. And he was working right alongside these men. And he was joking with them, you know, every once in a while you'd see him like nudge the guy, you know, and they looked like they were enjoying themselves. And I was so moved by this really stuck in my mind that I had to talk to my friend Stephanie and Andrew, who was running the fine art, the Umpqua Valley Arts Center. And he said, I know exactly who you're talking about, because we used prison labor to set up for the arts festival. And these men did an amazing job setting up the tents and setting up for the arts festival. And when they were all done, he came back and volunteered for the arts festival, right? And you know, and so it's just, you have to imagine somebody, this was just 2 instances out of this man's life. Who knows how much good this man has done, you know.
Exactly.
You know, and so it's like instances like that give me a lot of hope for where we're going,
Yes.
regardless of the, you know, the enormous challenges that we have. I truly believe that there are people, you know, who are going to see us through.
Yes.
So,
And the thing is, we've been conditioned for so long to think that we're separate. So this isn't like an overnight correction. It's a change of your consciousness, your beliefs, your knowing, all of that. So it's a process.
mhm.
But the more of us that reach that, then, the more that will follow, because they will see that, this is how we become healthy and whole, is by embracing everyone and helping them. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, this has been an amazing discussion for me. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Does anybody have anything else?
Well, I just had this one memory of what it was I'd wanted to say, that it's not so much we're looking for spiritual truth as we're looking for how it functions. And that's when we can say love is the greater power. We don't even know how powerful love is, because we have to face skeptics, we have to face anger, we have to do so many things just to be loving. So it's a big deal, guys. And Jesus was trying to say it would work, and he wasn't talking about truth. He was talking about how love works.
Yeah.
That's our big lesson.
Yeah,
That
right.
is the lesson.
Laura Lee had a hand up before.
Yeah.
I just wanted to, well, of course, I need to compliment my son, but it was an extremely inspirational discussion and talk that you gave today. And I really appreciate you, Michael. Thank you.
Right back at you. So, all right. Well, go lift it up. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. So thank you everybody for participating, and we will do it again next week. So
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everyone.
bye-bye.
Bye.
I
Michael
love
and
you
Kim,
all.